introduction into our conversation about reparations. Reparations has been a very present topic in the news and in the media over the last year, perhaps. Um, Initiated in 2004 with the slavery reparations lawsuit that occurred in the 7th U.S. District here in Chicago. Reparations has had a here and now type of come and go and type of presence in the media. Recently, the idea of reparations for the descendants of slaves has come on to the media because of the political atmosphere. Many Democrats have made mention that they thought it was appropriate that African Americans or American descendants of slaves, as people are now mentioning it, be granted reparations. So I thought it was important that we discuss reparations on a grander scale. The first question you have to ask is, what are reparations? And in my book, Competent Proof: The Legal Standing African Americans Have in the Battle for Slavery Reparations, I go into detail about what are reparations. And I think people have to understand is that reparations is a legal process. It's a legal entity, so to speak. And it's when clearly there's been a person or a group harmed, and that person or a group, either with or without the cooperation of the person that caused the harm or the injury, receives compensation for that injury. For example, when the Holocaust occurred in Europe and 6 million Jews were slaughtered through the Nazis' murder machine, at the end of the war, reparations were granted to the Jews by the German state. And there were basically legal documents filed in petitions that granted these reparations, and the rules by how these reparations would be rendered to the people who were injured by the Nazis or the German regime. And so Jews all over the world, not just Jews that were directly affected by the Holocaust, but Jews all over the world received reparations or received financial. The compensation wasn't just financial. There were rules passed. There were laws passed to prevent this from happening again. They got financial compensation as well, but there are also institutions drafted up and put into place that would bring recompense into the Jewish population. In World War II, Japanese were interned in California, or Japanese citizens of America were rounded up and put in internment camps. They lost their property, they lost their homes, they lost their livelihoods, and they were placed in internment camps, I believe, for the duration of the war. Because they were United States citizens and it hadn't been proven that they were any threat to the United States, at the end of the war, it was deemed that their rights were violated, and because their rights were violated, they were due compensation for the violation of those rights. And I'm not sure the exact date. I wrote it down in the book. I forgot the time that this occurred. But as a result of what occurred during the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, they were granted wide sweeping reparations that were thought to be to repair or to compensate them for the losses of property, of the civil liberties during their time of internment. There were other reparations lawsuits that occurred. One was with the black farmers who, and I speak about it in the book, how they were granted reparations because of the loss of land and the loss of resources that occurred through manipulation of funds that were supposed to be given to them through different United States funding sources. So one of the things, that is what reparations basically is. It's a repair for a common injury. One of the things that occurs in reparations is there are two components to reparations. And let's talk for a minute about what happened in 2004. In 2004, the reparations lawsuit was filed. The judge that over this reparations lawsuit was Charles Norgal. Charles Norgal gave the lawsuit that was filed by, I think her name was Deidre Farmer. You'll read about it in my book, Competent Proof. And what occurred was he put it in class status. And what class status means is that all reparations lawsuits from now on for American descendants of slaves are going to be put into this class status. And so once that reparation lawsuit was filed, all reparations lawsuits on the dockets were put under this class status, and they were all rolled into one suit, so that you didn't have thousands of suits coming from all over the place and flooding the justice system with just various lawsuits. So what occurred with their class status was they combined the suit to multiple suits, and they had basically a trial or a hearing on it, and it was deemed the case was dismissed. And the reason the case was dismissed was because there were 5 points that Judge Norgal put in his dismissal order, and I talk about them in my book. But I think it's important for people to understand the 2 most pertinent. One of them is called competent proof, and the other is called legal standing. And that's the reason why I named the book Competent Proof, the legal standing African Americans have in the battle for slavery reparations, because it was important that those 2 points be brought up. Competent proof basically means that you have proof of an injury. How were you injured by a certain individual that you're seeking reparations from? Legal standing is a concept whereas that you actually have legal standing to file that lawsuit. And let me go further into both of these so people can get a good understanding about why African Americans or American descendants of slaves have not received reparations at this point and why it's not being seriously considered. There's another issue called justiciability. Justiciability means that is there a problem that's being presented to the courts that can be solved in the courts, and would that problem be better served through the Congress? That was one of the other pieces to the dismissal, but that's not as important, I think, as competent proof and legal standing. Competent proof. The reason why we can't prove, we have not been able to prove up to now that we have an injury. Now, we talked earlier about epigenetics and transgenerational epigenetics, and because clearly there are patterns of mental and physical disease that are present in the African American community that I feel could be directly attributed to our transit through this country as our ancestors being enslaved, then 150 years of Jim Crow segregation and oppression, as well as the fact that there's this constant discrimination and stress upon us. That is the proof and how it's affected us genetically and how it's led to the health disparities and the poor health is the competent proof. But can we prove that that injury that occurred, that we feel has occurred in us, is actually there? And the only way you can prove that would be through scientific study. The other issue is legal. Here's where, this is what I mean by legal, this is what it means by legal standing. If I'm walking down the street with my child and I get hit by a car, the person that hit me by the car would be responsible for my injuries. My child files a lawsuit and says, I was injured when my father was, but they weren't hit by the car, but they got injured, and they're saying that their injury is due to them witnessing it. While there may have been some trauma that they experienced by my accident, that would not give them legal standing to file the suit. They weren't directly injured by the cause of this. Same thing occurs in the whole discussion of slavery reparations. You read more about it in the book. Legal standing, you have to be able to prove that you have a right to file a suit. The injury that slavery was to our foreparents or our ancestors does not give us the right. In Judge Norgal's case, this is what he said, does not give us the right to file a suit for reparations because the injury was to them, it wasn't to us, is what they're saying. So we don't have legal standing. This is how the courts define the fact that we did not have legal standing. These points are important because in order for us to get reparations for American descendants of slaves, we're going to have to overcome the burden of competent proof. We're going to have to discuss this and show that there's proof of a current injury that is a direct result of slavery. Number two, we're going to have to prove that we have legal standing. We got to prove that we have legal standing to bring this suit before the court, because what has occurred is the injury that occurred to our parents thereby has to give us legal standing to file a reparations suit, and that's not been proven. So, as it goes for reparations and American descendants of slaves, I believe that our best opportunity to prove that we do deserve slavery reparations lies in epigenetics, and the discussion of transgenerational epigenetics has to deal with proving that there was an injury that occurred to our parents that has been translated down through our genes, and that gives us the legal standing and competent proof that we should be able to get slavery reparations for that purpose. And I hope I explained that clear enough. But that's where we got to start. If you believe that slavery reparations are appropriate and they're deserving, there are many different organizations around the country right now that are fighting for it. One is a group I'm affiliated with called ASSERT, which is African American Slave Reparations Trust. And what we're doing is we've already established our own reparations fund, and we're contributing to it ourselves. Shout out to my frat brother Daryl Fortson, MD, for actually initiating most of the ASSERT, AASRT. You can go online and get more information about ASSERT. You can make a monthly contribution, and we're going to be distributing these funds to the community, to people in need as a form of reparations. One of the things about reparations, we really don't have to wait for the government to put the funds in our hands to start taking better care of those people who are directly affected by slavery and its aftermath. We can start doing that on our own, and we're doing that with ASSERT. So stay tuned for more, and we're gonna keep putting this information out here for people to learn more about reparations, slavery reparations, and transgenerational epigenetics and epigenetics.